With the Iranian regime watching to judge what and who they are up against in Donald Trump's war, Donald Trump failed another "can he stay awake and alert in the cabinet room" test today. And remember, this was a meeting about the most important thing the cabinet can ever discuss: war.
The morale of their fighters plummeting, and we see that disconnect daily. They're privately admitting, as you said, Mr. President, very heavy losses. We know that. President Trump has given us a clear mission. Our capabilities are only going up and Iran's are plummeting. We are here to win, and we're full speed ahead.
And while he was at it, Donald Trump failed another self-administered cognitive test by being incoherent and wildly wrong about very, very simple things. Since 2018, Donald Trump has been publicly insisting that he has been taking cognitive tests and that he aced them. That's his word, aced. In 2020, the New York Times described the cognitive test that Donald Trump was boasting about as, quote, a 10-minute screening exam meant to highlight possible problems with thinking and memory. And the questions include being able to draw a clock and identifying a lion, rhino, or camel. A perfect score is 30. A score from 26 to 30 is considered normal. So a perfect score on the cognitive test that Donald Trump claims he aced is normal. The only reason to repeatedly administer cognitive tests to Donald Trump would be doctors' concern about Donald Trump's cognitive ability. Now, listen to Donald Trump today, in the middle of what was supposed to be a wartime cabinet meeting, lying once again about his cognitive test.
I don't want a stupid person being president. You know, I'll say it right now. I say it because no press ever reports it. I'm the only president that ever took a cognitive test. I took it 3 times. It's actually a very hard test for a lot of people. It wasn't hard for me, but it's a cognitive test. It starts off with an easy question, and by the time you get to the middle, it gets tougher. By the time you get to the end, very few people can answer those questions. They get very tough mathematical equations and things. I took it 3 times. I aced it all 3 times in front of numerous doctors that I have no idea who they are. And I was told when I went in, they said, Doc Ronnie told me this. My current doctors are fantastic doctors. They said, well, if you take it, you know, it's Walter Reed. It's essentially a public hospital. And if you do badly, it's probably going to get out. But I aced it. I got them all right. And one doctor said, I've never seen anybody get them all right. I've been doing the test for 20 years.
Doctors see people get perfect scores all the time on cognitive tests. All the time. Perfect scores are normal. One question that is not on the cognitive test is, how much does a Sharpie cost? That became relevant today as Donald Trump, in a wartime cabinet meeting, drifted off into pathological lying about $1,000 pens and Sharpies in another proof that Donald Trump does not have the attention span or the mental capacity to be commander-in-chief.
See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. But I can't have the pen the way it was. You know what it is. I don't want to give too much publicity, but they do treat me well. Sharpie. So I came here. They have $1,000 pens. And, you know, you hand pens out. You're signing and you hand them out. You're handing them to all these people. Sometimes you have 30, 40 people. And they were $1,000 a piece. Beautiful pen, ballpoint. 1,000. It was gold, silver, gorgeous. But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what they are. What is this, Mommy? It's kids. They're getting a pen for $1,000. They have no idea what it is. And I feel guilty because I'm like, you know, I'm by nature, I don't, you know, it's the government. I love the government like I love myself economically. I want to save money. So I'm saying, this is crazy. And it had another problem. They didn't write well. So I take it out and I saw it and there's no ink. And I got all you people looking, and you say, there must be something wrong with Trump. And I'm signing, and there's no ink in the pen, and it costs $1,000. This one, I called the guy. I said, I'd like to use your pen, but I can't have a gray thing with a big S on it saying Sharpie. As I'm signing a $1 trillion airplane contract to buy brand new fighter jets, brand new B-2 bombers, of which we just ordered plenty. I can't do that with the press. Use your pen, but I like the pen the best. But I'll sign it. I could do like Biden did, you know, give it to somebody else to sign, or an auto pen, or maybe sign it separately in another room. But I can't use your pen. He said, well, I can make it nicer. I said, what can you do? He said, I'll paint it black. I said, that's nice. And I can even paint the White House on it, sir, if you like, in gold. Almost real gold, not bad. And I can even do your signature, sir. And by the way, this was not staged. I just saw the pen sitting there, and I thought of this as an example of how $25 million spent by me at the Federal Reserve Building would be a better job than $4 billion that they're spending.
The Iranian regime was watching. And then he floated into a deranged digression about the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Republican Jerome Powell, in which Donald Trump said, among other things, quote, we have a moron at the Fed, end quote. When Donald Trump finally found his way back to his beloved Sharpie, he said this.
Just to finish on this one. So I told that story to somebody and said, yeah, but it's not the same thing. I said, you're right. This one is better. It writes. So the guy said to me, you don't have to pay me, sir. I'll give them to you for nothing. I said, no, I don't want that. Let me pay you. I want to pay you. No, sir, you don't have to. You're the president of the United States. He was shocked. The head of Sharpie gets a call. I don't even know who the hell he is. He said, is this really the president? He said, no, you don't have to pay me, sir. This is such an honor. I said, no, I want to pay you. And he said, what would you like to pay? I said, how about $5 a pen? He said, that's all right, whatever the hell we agreed to. Peanuts. As opposed to 1,000. And these were $1,000 pens. And we were giving them out. Sometimes, you know, you were there for signings. I'd have 30, 40 people standing behind me. I'd give out 40 pens to people. Then somebody would say, could I have a couple extra? This way I'd go like this. Here, you want 5? Here, take 5. But the bottom line is, they're better pens. It's a business story. So for $5, could be 0, but for $5, I get a much better pen than for $1,000. And I can hand them out. And actually, they become hot as a pistol. So what can I tell you? With that, could I give it to, please, a man who's done a great job at Treasury, Scott? Good luck, Scott.
Well, sir, as always, you're a tough act to follow, but that is very illustrative.
It is indeed very illustrative, as Scott Bessent just said. Donald Trump, the master negotiator, negotiating the price of a Sharpie, one Sharpie at $5. At Staples, right now, you can get a dozen for $8.99. That's 75 cents a Sharpie right now at Staples. Donald Trump was trying to show the room what a brilliant negotiator he is on behalf of the United States government, always getting the lowest price, even on Sharpies. And Donald Trump was in a room where he and none of the other billionaires in the room had the vaguest idea what the price of a Sharpie is. None of them had any idea. And so the $5 a Sharpie sounded great to those oblivious Trump buffoons. In any presidential campaign, it is always hard to pick the moment that decided the campaign. But in 1992, when the economy was the issue and President George H.W. Bush appeared to be oblivious to prices at a grocery store checkout counter, that may have been the moment when all was lost for the Bush campaign as Bill Clinton continued to campaign on what would now be called affordability. And in this moment in the American economy, with gas prices skyrocketing in the second year of a presidency in which the central campaign promise was to lower prices, Donald Trump demonstrated his obliviousness about a price that every mother or father with kids in school knows, the price of a Sharpie, 75 cents. Oh, And those $1,000 pens Donald Trump was talking about at the White House for bill signings, they never existed. That's a lie. The pens used for bill signings before the Trump presidency were very nice, high-end ballpoint pens with a retail price of about $200. President Bill Clinton gave me one of those pens at the bill signing for that budget bill that we first began discussing in that first cabinet room meeting that I was in. Joe Biden used slightly cheaper pens for bill signings during his presidency, but they were expensive pens, not $1,000. There are much more expensive pens in this world. Donald Trump is right that $1,000 pens exist. They just never have been used by the President of the United States for bill signings. So going from a $200 pen to a 75-cent Sharpie, or even Donald Trump's wildly overpriced $5 Sharpie, could be Donald Trump's only successful cost-cutting exercise in all of government, but he's not satisfied with it. He has to lie about the $1,000 pens that never existed. The Iranian regime that Donald Trump is at war with was watching today. They watched who they are up against. And we can be sure that they found it very illustrative.
As we mentioned at the top of the hour, tonight President Trump announced that he's going to sign an executive order directing the Secretary of Homeland Security to pay TSA agents and end the chaos at our nation's airports. Now, very clearly, he's trying to take credit for solving the problem here. That's to state the obvious. But remember, this is a problem he himself created and has perpetuated now for weeks. I mean, Democrats have repeatedly offered to pass a standalone bill funding the TSA. Even Republicans, like Senators John Kennedy and Ted Cruz, got on board with that plan. But Trump refused. He could have signed this executive order at any point over the past month, or he could have agreed to the deal Democrats were offering him. But he chose not to. He created this mess, and now he's trying to take all of the credit for fixing it. If you don't believe me, here was Republican Senator John Kennedy saying it as clear as can be earlier this week.
We could have had TSA paid by the end of the week, but the president said no deals.
Now, to make matters worse, because Trump waited so long on this, just funding TSA doesn't mean the agency is now suddenly fixed. I mean, earlier this week, the head of TSA told Congress that nearly 500 TSA agents have quit since the start of the partial shutdown. She added that it takes 4 to 6 months to train new TSA officers. So even though Trump has now all of a sudden decided that he wants to fund the TSA, a lot of damage has already been done. It won't be that easy to reverse. He's always been a ball of chaos. He's always makes messes that take a long time to clean up. But in just the past few weeks, he has created crises after crises that Americans aren't just reading about in the news, but are experiencing firsthand. I mean, for example, anywhere in the country, if you turn on any local TV news broadcast tonight, I bet you will see stories like this one.
Gas prices in the state of Texas have gone up by more than $1 in just the last month. And with strikes now targeting critical oil infrastructure in the Middle East, we may be in for just the beginning.
Gas prices in Utah are close to $1.20 higher per gallon than a month ago.
Gas prices here in Maine rose once again this morning.
Gas prices staying high and getting higher in Las Vegas.
Washingtonians paying $5.27 per gallon on average.
The average price for a gallon of regular gas in California is now $5.82.
Everywhere. Today, oil prices rose yet again after Donald Trump removed his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz from this Friday to April 6th. And of course, that timeline really means nothing, as we've just been talking about. But even if Trump does end up negotiating an end to the war and reopening somehow the Strait of Hormuz next month, and I don't know how that will happen, experts say that gas prices here at home are likely to remain high for a very long time. One economist telling the New York Times that even if the war were to end soon, he thinks it would still take another 6 to 8 weeks for oil production and shipments to normalize. That's going to have a real impact on Americans' pocketbooks. And because Trump owns this crisis so completely, it could also have a real impact on American politics. Take a listen to this young voter that MS Now interviewed at a gas station in New Jersey last weekend.
My car here typically is only $35 to fill, but now it's in the $45, $50 range, and it's a little ridiculous.
Have you ever voted for a Democrat?
I have not yet, no.
Do you think you will now?
I'd say I'd be more open to it.
He'd be more open to it. There's something there. Joining me now is New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill. Governor Sherrill, Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. I just want to start. There's just been new reporting this evening about Donald Trump saying he intends to sign an executive order to pay the TSA. I wanted to ask you about it because I think a lot of people who see that headline may think, this is solved. I'm going to go to the airport tomorrow and the lines will be short. Do you know anything more about it or how it would work in terms of paying TSA agents and how people should anticipate if he does sign it soon, how long it will take to get things back to normal?
As usual, this is completely ridiculous. There's no plan. He makes some tweet. God only knows how the Republicans are going to respond to this. But certainly if he could have done this, he should have done it already. The idea that he's putting these ICE agents in the airports, from what we've heard, they're just milling around. They don't know what to do. You just put out the information that it takes months to train TSA agents, so just putting this sort of untrained militia in the middle of an airport just gets in the way of everyone. We're still hearing, despite all these ICE agents, Houston still was taking about 3 hours to get through the security line. It's really striking to me, everywhere I turn, things that were, not the concern. We have a lot of concerns in New Jersey, but things that you just took for granted, taking a flight somewhere, being able to get through an airport line and security without too much drama, and then get on your flight and not worry that there might not be air traffic controllers focused on your flight, or that you might get into a crash on the tarmac or, God forbid, in the air. Again and again, we're just seeing routine, basic things that Americans should expect to function, not functioning under the Trump administration. It's why I'm fighting so hard to chart a different path forward here in New Jersey.
It is. That is such a definition of what happens. He creates a problem, then tries to solve it sometimes, doesn't know how to solve it. It's a real pattern, and you're really seeing the impact in your state. I wanted to ask you mentioned ICE at airports. I think it's scaring a lot of people. We've showed a lot of footage of ICE agents sort of milling about, looking at people, getting coffee. It's hard to understand what's actually happening there. It's not reducing the lines. But when you ran for governor, you talked a lot about energy prices. We'll talk about that. You didn't focus a ton on ICE, but your tenure as governor has. You took a number of actions just yesterday. Tell us about why, kind of what prompted you to take those actions. And I'd also love to hear more about whether you think the politics around the issue have just shifted.
What I learned over the last year is it's important to constantly connect with the people you're serving, to hear day in and day out about what's going on in their lives and how, as governor, as somebody elected to serve them, I can make their opportunity better, make their lives more secure, protect their kids. That's what I committed to doing, driving down costs in this affordability crisis, giving a better future to our kids, and holding government accountable for the ways in which it can do all of these things. And so I got to work right away. And that's why, as we charted out the state of emergency on utility costs, I froze rate hikes in the middle of my inaugural address as I was continuing to work to make government more accountable and put an online dashboard up so people could see where their money was going in this budget and focus the budget on taking care of our kids and their mental health and online safety. I was hearing again and again about how concerned people were about their safety, the interactions they'd had on the streets here in New Jersey with ICE agents, the masked people that were carrying weapons that refused to identify themselves or give any update on what they were doing. We were reaching out to DHS to say, what is the plan here? Why are they in certain spaces? We were seeing dangerous interactions where kids dispersed and ran away as they were going through pickup on the bus in the mornings, and principals madly trying to find out where these kids were who were supposed to be in school. So again and again, seeing dangerous situations with no accountability. So I moved. I said, look, I have pledged to keep our streets and our kids safe, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'll tell you, I can't weigh in on nationally or where people should go in any given moment. I can tell you in New Jersey, if you are fighting for the people that you serve, if you're willing to stand up to anyone, including the President of the United States, as I am, then you're going to do quite well.
Let me ask you about energy prices. Because you ran on this issue, you just mentioned it. It was something you talked about relentlessly, even before Trump started a war in Iran 4 weeks ago. And I was wondering, given that you ran on the issue, but also your background in national security, when your constituents ask you, when are our gas prices going to come down? What do you tell them in this moment?
You know, I have constituents who ask me about gas prices and affordability. I have a lot of constituents, and we have National Guard deployed right now in the Middle East who want to know what the plan is. And then, you know, we just have people who were committed to, they said, I thought this president was going to end the forever wars. That's what he said. Mikey, how do you think this is going to be different? And I have to tell them this war makes no sense. I served on the House Armed Services Committee. I was in the United States Navy for almost 10 years as a helicopter pilot. I was there as we were fighting the global war on terror. And I can tell you, you can't simply remove a regime with no plan, as we did. And that's how we got into the last 20-year war. We saw what happened in Vietnam as we had no good ground strategy. And now, again, what we've basically accomplished, what Trump has accomplished here, is he has taken out the Ayatollah, replaced him with his more hardline, more anti-American son. He's actually lifted sanctions so that Iranians can sell their oil. You could see a world where they make money off that just to buy weapons to fire against Americans. And he has no strategy in sight for lowering gas prices across the country during an affordability crisis. It's striking how every time he gets engaged and involved, working people's lives get worse.
No question about it. I think people are living and experiencing, you just summarized so well. It's troops, it's people who have children who might serve, it's people paying more at the gas tank. It's all of the things you mentioned, Governor Mikey Sherrill. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Donald Trump is losing a lot in court, even though he's made the DOJ more partisan this term than during his first term, when he had an attorney general who actually followed the binding DOJ rules. That led to the appointment of special counsel Mueller, for example, who just passed away last weekend, the end of a legal era. That's relevant because the current DOJ and FBI leaders blatantly break rules. A.G. Bondi, accused of breaking the Epstein law, of lying to the public, of misleading Congress. The FBI director you see there, his behavior kind of speaks for itself. So she and the FBI are going after Trump's enemies list, probing and indicting the people that Trump publicly demands. You can see the results here. Now, that can be illegal itself, but they've done it so incompetently that they keep losing. The green stamps show cases that have already fallen apart and been tossed. Trump's DOJ has had these cases stumble at early stages, lose. Sometimes Bondi's chosen prosecutors actually fail so badly, they've lost their own entire DOJ jobs in the process. Courts disqualifying them because they didn't get the required Senate approval to hold the job permanently. Now, that's bad. DOJ keeps losing. They should be chastened. They should follow the rulings and the law. But instead, A.G. Bondi has been going full Aaliyah. If at first DOJ don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again. Try again. Bondi is trying again on the losing quest to convict former FBI Director Comey. The news tonight is I've ginned up a new subpoena. That's after Trump's current AG and FBI director failed to build a valid case against him before, let alone win it. Keep in mind, the current FBI director under Trump is literally trying to jail the former FBI director on thin, sometimes meaningless, baseless charges. Ditto for New York Attorney General James. The Fed's trying again, Aaliyah style, after their last case was dismissed at the start. Evidence suggests these cases are illegal selective prosecution. And it's not just this lane. Trump is also losing cases on policy. His signature tariffs, of course, smacked down by the Supreme Court. That included his own appointees ruling that he was powerless under law to do that kind of trade war without Congress. That's just the law. Trump responding by saying he's, quote, sickened by those judges' independence. Basically, that because they're doing a judicial job, what they're supposed to do, rather than being his blind partisans, that's a problem. And he falsely claims the judges have become some kind of criminal if they rule against him.
We got rogue judges that are criminals. They're criminals. What they do to our country, the decisions that they hand down and hurt our country. And not that it matters, doesn't matter at all. But two of the people that voted for that, I appointed, and they sicken me.
It doesn't matter at all, but he's giving a speech about it. It doesn't matter, but he's sickened. You're seeing failure and loss in public from someone who's for all of his vaunted PR tactics employs, he's currently maybe not very disciplined or effective at holding back the conflicting message, the anger, the loss. Now, he's gone beyond just that complaint. He's pitching an actual bill that would try to target what he calls rogue judges, while Bondi's deputy blames judges for their losses and admits plans to try to move cases to more friendly MAGA areas.
We see our most activist judges that we lose to every single day are, without a doubt, nothing more than an extension of the partisan arm of which they came from. There's a lot of ways that we can work within that to get some of our cases where we want them to be, where we're going to have a judge that we know is going to be fair.
So he admits they're losing and they want a judge shop. The DOJ is also now paying former defendants from the Mueller probe. Mueller, of course, back in the news this past week with his passing. They are handing over $1 million to a Trump vet, you might recall, Michael Flynn, claiming that Mueller wrongly prosecuted him over false statements. Of course, Flynn was a grown-up, and he pled guilty in that very case. The payment, an extraordinary effort of relief for Trump allies, the New York Times notes. Now, does Trump really suddenly care about getting some money to a former aide? It's your taxpayer money, by the way, but we're talking about someone, Donald Trump, who's long stiffed his own employees and aides when it comes to money. Or is this more about setting a precedent to enrich himself, to get that kind of payment to himself? We keep track of this, even if sometimes it's all a little bit of a blizzard. So let me remind you, to his great shame and loss, Donald Trump tried and failed to ram through a plan to pilfer a whopping $230 million of taxpayer money this term, using a similar format as this brand new Flynn payment, that the DOJ should reimburse him for his own mistakes that led to those probes. Now, Trump failed to get that done so far. Even his partisan DOJ opposed approving something that was a legal conflict of interest that judges might quickly block. Experts, if you're curious, also said that the federal law they were citing actually bans that kind of large punitive damage payment, if you're keeping track. And Republicans viewed it as a kind of political suicide to take that much money from the public and put it in Trump's pocket while he's the sitting president. No president's ever done that. And yet now the Trump DOJ seems oddly interested again in pushing a similar MAGA-enriching legal theory. Dust yourself off and try again, if you will.
Day 27 of the war with Iran, and here's where things stand. Rising fuel prices have forced the U.S. Postal Service to impose an 8% surcharge on all of your packages. And inflation is now expected to top 4%. That's according to one estimate. As for Donald Trump, he faces no good options to end the war he started and growing frustration among the American public over the economic pain his war is causing. Brand new reporting from the Wall Street Journal reveals that, quote, nearly 1 month into the war, the president has privately informed advisors he thinks the conflict is in its final stages, urging them to stick to the 4 to 6 week timeline he's outlined publicly. At the White House today, Donald Trump denied the reporting and said he is, quote, the opposite of desperate. But it is becoming increasingly clear that he has few good options. The Iranian regime has rejected a U.S. peace proposal. There are no active negotiations between the United States and Iran at this moment. 2 U.S. officials and 2 sources with knowledge tell Axios the Pentagon is plotting a, quote, final blow that would involve boots on the ground. Among the options Trump could choose from, seizing Karg Island, where most of Iran's oil is exported from, capturing Iranian territory to allow for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, or blocking ships that are exporting Iran's oil. Many of these possibilities involve boots on the ground. And Axios warns that, quote, many of the scenarios under discussion would risk prolonging and intensifying the fight rather than bringing it to a dramatic conclusion. And that is something Trump does not want to do. U.S. officials tell the Wall Street Journal that, quote, Trump is willing to order U.S. troops on Iranian soil, but is reluctant to do so in part because it could upend his goal of a speedier end to the conflict. He is concerned that the number of U.S. troops killed or injured in the operation could rise if the war continues. The president being confronted with his limited options for an off-ramp, none leading to his original stated goal of regime change, and his war of choice with Iran is where we begin today. Washington Post reporter John Hudson is here. He covers the State Department and national security. Also with us, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. And former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman is here. She led the U.S. negotiating team that reached an agreement on the Iran nuclear deal back in 2015. General Hertling, how sobering that reporting from Axios about the options that the Pentagon is laying before the president. Your take on the options that are being floated?
Yeah, it's troubling, Alicia. We've talked about this before, but we're talking about different courses of actions to bring a political solution to this, and you're not going to do that with troops on the ground, I don't think. You've got various courses of actions, and one of the things we've discussed in the past is something called the troop-to-task ratio. When there's all different kinds of potential tasks for a military organization to accomplish, they're spread very thin. We currently have 2 Marine Expeditionary Units and 1 airborne brigade with an airborne headquarters flowing into the region. That's 10,000 forces. That seems like a lot, but when you're talking about the size of the country of Iran, and the potential that they have to defend themselves with air defense equipment, drone strikes, explosively formed penetrators like they used in such great numbers in Iraq when I was there, they are not going to sit still and just wait for the U.S. forces to invade. They're going to defend their country because this is an existential threat for Iran. They know that there are dangers lurking, and they're defending their sovereign territory. It doesn't matter what we think in terms of whether or not they have a bad regime or the Ayatollah is a bad human being and they're oppressing their people. They still have a desire with the Revolutionary Guard Corps to defend what they see as sovereign territory.
General Hertling, I'm reminded of what Trump's own former defense secretary, Jim Mattis, said just this week about the way Trump is handling the war. Quote, targetry never makes up for a lack of strategy. And when I listen to this reporting, I'm hearing a lot of tactics. I am not, at least in my interpretation of what I am reading, seeing a strategy come together. So if each of these tactics is specifically aimed at opening the Strait of Hormuz, then theoretically that then, assuming it were successful, allows ships carrying oil to get through. Then what? What happens then?
That's what we've been talking about, Alicia, since the very start of this war. If you don't have an end state, the means that you use the military to conduct, along with the ways you're using them to conduct those means, it doesn't fit together. We're seeing battles, kinetic strikes, the potential use of military forces, whether it be a Marine unit or an Army unit. But again, what are you trying to achieve? Now it seems it's an economic purpose. Open the Straits of Hormuz, try and get the markets back. I'm not so sure that's the best way to use military forces. Unless you have a political end state, you're going to waste a lot of lives. And I think that was apparent in your opening statement. And what you're going to see in terms of forces going into combat on the ground are going to face much more difficulties than you see when you have airplanes and Tomahawk missiles bombing from 30,000 or 10,000 feet. It's just a different ballgame. You're seeing the force involve itself in human interactions on the ground, in tough terrain, in geography that is very different than anything we faced recently. Trying to establish a waterway to get ships out, if that's the purpose, if that is the political end state, you're going to need a whole lot more troops to conduct that task.
So, Wendy, I want you to help me connect the dots between that military analysis and the diplomatic analysis. You have Axios reporting inside the administration. There are folks who think their show of force would increase their leverage against Iran. When you are talking about diplomacy, do you buy that?
Well, look, I think we always need a credible threat of force in any negotiation of this nature. However, as General Hertling knows, the Strait of Hormuz was open before the war. Mm-hmm. So the closure of the strait is a consequence of the war, not a cause of it. And indeed, the president and Steve Witkoff today talked about putting in front of Iran a 15-point plan, which Iran says is impossible. And in fact, the gap is enormous. And Pakistan, the country that ostensibly has been trying to mediate, sending messages back and forth, today it appears that the Pakistani embassy in Tehran and the Pakistani ambassador's residence got hit by a missile, whether it was ours or Israel's or something else. But nonetheless, there are unintended consequences of this kind of war, where, as the general has said, the tactics may be good, the battles may go well, our military is excellent, but there is no strategy. And indeed, all we have accomplished here, painfully, besides the death of Americans and the death of so many civilians in the region, including in Iran, is that we now have a more radical, as I call them, the hardliners. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is now in charge. And because there have been 2 instances where we have been negotiating with Iran only to attack them, the Iranians are not going to be in a rush to believe that they can get a deal that meets their national interest just because we want it.
Well, Wendy, in light of that analysis, you have the Journal reporting that some people close to Trump are urging him to go harder, saying regime change in Iran could be legacy defining. I mean, are they in la la land? Because I'm not understanding any of this to be bringing us closer to that goal.
Well, there has been a segment of our population and our political class who have believed for a long time that the regime should be ended and we should do it by force. But that is going to take a lot of troops. That is going to take boots on the ground. I know that some are suggesting that the president say, here's our proposal. If the folks who are in charge don't agree, well, let's decapitate them and get to the next level until we find some folks who will agree. But all we have done as a result of these tactics is to increase the nationalization of it, the nationalism in Iran. This is a country with a great history of pride and resilience and resistance. And all we have done, I believe, is increase their resistance. They have asymmetric tactics they can use, as the general has mentioned. They are not going to give up easily. They are not going to capitulate just because we want them to. And as the general said, none of us likes this regime. All of us want the people of Iran to have freedom. And of course, none of us want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That's something we've worked for a long, long time. These tactics aren't getting us there.
The president has been up for a while on Truth Social, very active this morning. And as the war in Iran rages on, new polling shows the conflict could be a growing political liability for the president, as well as his fellow Republicans as they head into the midterms. According to the latest AP NORC poll, 59% of Americans say that the U.S. military action in Iran has gone too far. That number is even higher among independent voters. The poll shows that 45% of Americans are extremely or very concerned about being able to afford gas in the coming months. That number was 30% back in December of 2024, shortly after Trump won re-election. Meanwhile, the president's foreign policy approval rating now sits at 34%. That's down 2 points from last month. Meanwhile, Trump's disapproval rating has reached an all-time high in the latest Fox News poll. It finds that Trump's approval rating is 41% and his disapproval rating is 59%, the latter marking a new high for either of his terms in office. The president also underwater on foreign policy, with 62% disapproving, while 64% disapprove in particular of how he's handling Iran. As for voter concerns, it will not surprise you to learn that inflation remains the biggest worry, with 86% concerned about high prices. Also, healthcare, gas prices, unemployment, and the ability to pay bills all rank above concerns about Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. Joining us now, a great group. The president and the CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, political strategist Mark McKinnon, and co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader. She's a contributor to the Notice Perspectives column. Thank you all for being here. Mark, thank you. McKinnon, I'll start with you. I'm struck that Fox News poll, this is the highest disapproval rating the president has ever registered. That includes the height of the COVID pandemic. That includes the aftermath of January 6th. Americans simply do not like the direction he's taking this country.
Well, I know something about presidents in war. I've been through this, and I remember, of course, George W. Bush in the Iraq conflict, and how popular it was for about a month, and then straight downhill to, pretty historic ratings. But we've seen nothing like this, and it's difficult to talk about the politics of this right now because it's such an urgent conflict with such disastrous consequences potentially, but the politics are pretty clear, and that is, it's bad now, and it's only likely to get worse. Even if the conflict were to stop tomorrow, economists say that the downstream effects are going to last at least 200 days. In my calculation, that's about November. Right? Yeah. So it's not going to get much better under the best of circumstances for Trump.
And Mark Morial, Mark makes a great point. There's some echoes of what happened in the Iraq War, but that was a war, as you say, that was popular to start. The president at the time built a coalition. He built public support. He made his case for months as to why we should do this. Now, the American people soured on it eventually, but it was popular to start. This conflict was never.
President Bush followed the Constitution and got a war authorization from the United States Congress after discussion and a debate amongst the American people. He convinced the American people that Iraq was a threat. Now, we learned later the intelligence was faulty. In this case, the haste and the rush to war from a president who for years promised that he'd not get us into a war represents a flip-flop from candidate Trump to President Trump. And I think what the voters are saying is, we didn't elect you to do this. We elected you to deal with pocketbook issues, affordability, those things that really concern us. And you've basically flip-flopped on us, and you're focusing on war. You're focusing on the attacks on civil rights. You've taken the country in a direction inconsistent with what you said when you were a candidate.
And let's build on that. He's not focusing on the economy. Prices remain high. And we're seeing it again this morning on Truth Social. He's not focused on, like, for instance, the situation at the airports, which this week in this country has been the topic number one. Lines at airports 3-4 hours long. Americans unable to get home to their families, to get to work, to see their child's ball game. Easter and Passover are on the horizon. This is a crisis, and he doesn't seem interested in fixing it.
Apparently, America is not first. I mean, that's really what we take away from this, right? And the fact is, he didn't even try to make a case to the American people about why we were going to face increased prices at the gas pump, why there might be longer-term challenges for the country, why we're sending some of our sons and daughters overseas, and he's just increased the number of boots on heading towards the Middle East in the last week. He has not even tried to explain why the suffering is worth it. And then you have these joint catastrophes, the sort of mess of dysfunction at home, which people are really starting to see and feel. And, back to George W. Bush, those numbers are so significant because, remember, when George W. Bush's poll numbers hit that kind of level, what did we see? We had 8 years of a Democratic president. We had 4 years of a Democratic trifecta in the next election. This has very serious long-term consequences for Republicans, but Trump has made it clear he doesn't seem to really care. He does not seem to be concerned with what happens in the midterms. He's just not interested. He's trying to pull this war back, but it's going to be too little too late.
Well, and most Republicans suggest the House probably already gone, Senate may be, and the markets just opened at 9:30. And, we know the markets are not the entire economy, but they're down again. We can see here the futures right here. Look, they're down as we start this morning. We also, Mark McKinnon, we know that the price of oil up again.
Yeah, and there's no, as you look at the conflict, there's no real path for de-escalation. In fact, you could argue just the opposite. So, again, politically, there's just, again, Mark was saying, this is completely contrary to what Trump ran on. He was supposed to be the guy to keep us out of conflicts. We're in a conflict. There seems to be no way to get out of it. And TSA, I went to the airport to get here at 2 a.m. in Denver, and I've got to go to LaGuardia tomorrow morning. And you're right. Voters are feeling the pain, and they're seeing it directly. And by the way, 2 Republicans, Ted Cruz and John Kennedy from Louisiana, went to the president with a very clear solution to this problem. They said, we've got this figured out. We can pay for TSA. We can fix the rest of it through reconciliation. Done. And Trump said no.
Yeah, Trump said no. And that's just it. He's really owning this crisis. in a way.
That's a great to put.
Not only is he
it's
holding
his.
the crisis, he's also acting inconsistent with really the value proposition of American democracy, which is that the president and the Congress are going to negotiate and try to find common ground and not just have lines drawn in the sand all over the place.
Yeah, and on that note, Mr. Mayor, in honor of America's 250th anniversary and to help citizens learn the tools needed to make informed decisions